So I'm here with Udo Neumann, and Udo, tell us a little bit about yourself and just a little bit of your background, because I've been following your work for years and I am fascinated with it. And I just like even the style that you present is so interesting. But I want you to kind of introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm 58 years old, and I think that's already a big part of the explanation of what I've been doing, because it just adds up over the like in terms of my experience or the little experiments that I've been doing and the experiences I have made. So there's a lot of different stuff that fortunately tends to inform what I'm doing next. So it's actually working really nicely for me. And I started when I started climbing, I thought I'd been already a little bit too late, because sport climbing started maybe 3 years earlier, and I was 19. So I already felt that I missed the boat.
When was this
there was in 82,
okay,
basically.
So
and I was in the States, I was in the States in Yosemite in 83 for the first time. And but again, for me, people like John Baker and like the very first, I would still call them sport climbers, because there was when climbing turned into a sport, they were a little bit older, and I was at the beginning I was a little bit jealous of and wishing that I would have started earlier. But before that, before I started climbing, I was doing whitewater kayaking. And like a really power endurance sport in which I competed in. And I think that informs what I'm thinking now, because I was physically really fit when I started climbing, but not very well coordinated what was asked for climbing. And so I got injured really quickly.
In those early stages?
Yeah, only in the early stages. Since I haven't been severely injured from climbing since decades now, but not to the point that I couldn't climb. But at the beginning, I could really quickly do a couple of one-arm pull-ups, but that didn't help me. My level was about 12A, 11A or 11B when I was doing 6 or 7 one-arm pull-ups.
So you had the physical strength, at least in the upper body, from your,
totally.
Kind of training, but it just wasn't translating.
Yeah, and I also had the mentality. I was really competitive, but then I did a master's in sport science, and it was actually a big part was physical education. It was a combination of these two things. So it had this scientific part and the hands-on part. And in the hands-on part, I discovered performing arts like miming and circus arts. And I had a circus school for a while.
But how was that introduction? What was, if you put yourself back in the moment, was it just proximity? It was there, or how did you? Because that is a fundamental of what you do now.
It's the sports uni in Cologne is I think still the biggest in the world. There is I don't know, they have 5,000 students now only for physical education sports, and so you got exposed to a lot of things. And first, I just attended this class because we were wondering where the best male-female ratio would be, and we tried it out, and I instantly fell in love with it. We had these miming classes and improv classes, and of course I wasn't aware of this in real time, but later this still informs my coaching so much. And I still, and of course there's body language, posture and all these things that you basically I picked up on the way.
Yeah, it's interesting how these small circumstantial experiences, you're oh, there's a nice ratio of males to or females to males in this class. Let me take that. And then you're exposed to something that changes your philosophy or introduces it.
Yeah, and it did because when I studied, when I started at the university, I was really narrow-minded, like and totally physical abilities and physical training obsessed. Like you would tell me how fast you run the 10K, and I would tell you if you're a good human being, and of course, with all the rehearsals, and then I had to do dance classes, which I did really terribly in, but I wanted to stay in the performing arts program, so I had to do all this dance, like really, like this were my most out of my comfort zone experiences still.
Yeah, I'm just imagining this like young, ripped, like strong, like rock climber, and then just trying to, coordinate all of these new foreign movements.
Even with, it was more the kayaker still at this point. You're wearing a helmet, you're wearing a vest, and you're not at all used to perform in front of anybody. And I played the piano for a while, but I was really nervous, because same thing, like fine coordination and being nervous, and a male teenager doesn't go together too well. So this is why I like the kayaking. You can really
power it.
Yes, and so it was almost something that needed to happen. For me,
to challenge you. So you got to that stage, and then how? What was your kind of evolution into what you're doing now in climbing, like kind of that evolution?
Yeah, actually, you probably aware of the book Performance Rock Climbing that Dale Goddard and I did, and it was actually at this point when it came into writing my master thesis, I wanted to write something about cycle regulation, like a psychology thing, because my girlfriend at this time did something similar too. And I still would have still a nice idea, but Dale was standing in my garden here in Cologne, and he said, better write about something people are really interested in. And so I did basically a profile of what it takes to be a successful competition climber. And these were the early competitions. So I sat next to the, even videotape was super advanced, and like.
So what date? Give us the timeline.
That was end of the 80s. So okay. 89, 90. And then in 91, Dale and I started to write Performance Rock Climbing, which took us 3 years.
And then once that book was out, did that change anything? Did that change?
Yeah, so I mean, performance rock climbing is still, I think it aged really well because there's an underlying story, or you have your three characters that guide you through the book. But it was also a little bit controversial, because I mean, I still don't know why, but I remember one time somebody told me that Dale and I ruined climbing because we took its innocence and explained it all with our scientific lingo, which I think is not really the case. But somehow I was, okay, another thing happened is my best friend stayed on kayaking. And for a decade, he became invincible in this downriver racing discipline. And so I was really involved into creating this training. We thought about training, we brainstormed about this training together. And we came up with what was now called the polarized training. So basically, we skipped the entire middle part, like everything that makes you tired went, and he was just paddling really, really softly or really, really hard, and our train of thought was that in endurance sport, but I think it's also overlooked in climbing really often, you have to make sure that you're fit and fresh and engaged the next day, and you have to think about the next day if you want to have a progression in whatever you do. And with this polarized training, that really helped him. So he could do huge volumes, but he was never really getting tired. And so this was a huge self-esteem boost, you know, he was the 5-time world champion and so basically invincible over this time. And of course, if you just came up with the ideas that led to this dominance, now in your kitchen, of course, you're confident that you,
yeah,
you know,
but you had someone you could apply it to, right?
Yes. And so he first became world champion in '91. So the first year, Dale and I started performance rock climbing, and they actually, if you read between the lines, these ideas, like with the capillarization, you know, or the these things tend to go a little bit through waves, you know, in the sense of how fashionable they are and how much people use also the lingo. And sometimes things pop up like fascia. Like when I was in school, we learned about Ida Rolf, you know, Rolfing.
Yeah, the technique. Yeah, and
the technique and the whole school of thought, and then 50 years later, 50 years later than Ida lived. Now I hear about fascia, you know, and it's this unknown, like but I mean, not that she.
But it's interesting because you've seen these trends. You've been around so long to see, as you're mentioning, things get popular. Things dive down, things kind of go through those oscillations. And it sounds like you were well aware of them early on, and you really had some, or at least they're on your mind, and you were like testing them out. You know,
I mean, there are many things we were totally wrong, you know, or as it is now, you know, that I tend to be really confident in the situation I'm in. But then looking back, I'm also embarrassed of things I just thought were true last week. You know, so
that's growth, right? That's continuing to grow.
Yeah, that's the nice word for it. But
so you put out this book. You kind of have also a case study of a kayaker, you know, doing quite well. So how does that then bridge you into like these next stages of like what you were doing in rock climbing, really?
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time in the States, and in the early 90s, I really was 50-50, and I really loved living and some of the, I wouldn't call it work ethics, but some of this, you know, in the States, it's a little bit more forward thinking, you know, and a little bit less looking behind what mistake somebody did. And I somehow still like, I really enjoy working in the States, you know, and I think that's a reason why the science, it's also more storytelling in everything, I feel, in the Anglo-Saxon world. So I really liked it, but I was still living in Germany. And so since I was a climber, and I was climbing in Germany, I became somehow this controversial figure in the German Alpine Club. And that was from my history, because I was also already a difficult teenager when I was in the kayak club. So I was struggling with authority regardless.
You're a rebel off the bat. That's that's your personality.
Yeah. So we in 2000 I did this book with Clem Loscott, and you know, and there was just lots of really hilarious, like when he first came to the Frankenjura, he already had this, people knew of him, you know, and then he just wanted to do top rope and to not get pumped for his bouldering later. And then he even sat in the rope, he rested on the 11A warm up. And the whole Frankenjura scene was sitting on the trees. Yes, blasphemy. But it also, like, this alone, you know, to avoid the pump, for example, that was totally in line from what we thought 10 years before for the kayaking, you know, and somehow for a while, Clem and I really were so like with Dale before, you know, like there are certain constellations they don't necessarily last for very long, but where the characters are really complementary, and that was really fantastic. But anyhow, and Clem really liked provocation too, so we became this provocative, like we were like about route setting and so. And there was even like it was so bad that the German Alpine Club hosted open discussion, about Udo Neumann's controversial.
Philosophies.
So yeah, and so at least they noticed, and so I could route set, to prove, or maybe they thought let him route set and see how difficult this is, and he will be quiet. And then later they asked me for coaching the German bouldering team.
Kind of comes full circle, right?
Yeah, but I think they didn't really care. Like this was even in the late 2000s. Bouldering was still a fact, considered to be like, this will be this is not real climbing.
Got it. So they're like, well, maybe you can coach bouldering, but maybe, this is kind of the group that you can work with.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't do any damage with the boulderers. But the advantage was, looking back, I mean, I've been working with lots of federations and clubs and so, and it's actually a reason why not everybody succeeds. Like many are structurally so not organized for, I wouldn't even say success, for even like for basic communication and so that I consider myself really lucky that with the German Alpine Club, they totally left me alone. And I bargained a little bit that I could be at every World Cup and travel with the team. There was a little bit of a discussion at the beginning. But once I got this, basically I could, nothing was too crazy.
Yeah, I was going to say, you had permission and you had a blank palette. And you got to do what you wanted, right?
Yeah, totally. And it was also nice that Jule Worm, the 2014 world champion, boulder world champion, and Jonas Baumann and Jan Hoyer were really welcoming too. Now that is, it's also another thing in Germany is, now, for example, in USA Climbing, everything is in Salt Lake, and just imagine like in 20 years, the Salt Lake guys are really arrogant about how fantastic they are. And they almost think that you have to be in Salt Lake to be a really good climber, or to develop as a really good climber. But then you have this scene in Albuquerque, and just the reason that the Salt Lake guys are so arrogant makes them stronger. And that was totally the case, because Cologne is in the west of Germany. It's like in the middle and west. And Munich is in the south, and like really close to the Alps. So there was a huge motivation that for us to from not Munich to show the Bavarians how it's done.
So you had rivalry, a little bit of rivalry between Cologne.
No, not a little bit. Yeah, it was again like a little bit troublemaking, a little bit, but it worked really to my, or not only to my, but we had for a couple of years, like in 2012, we started to make really, I think still a good plan with the route setters and, for example, the physios too, and like the medical staff, everybody, like, and all the coaches, how we would organize our camps and how we would track progress and track route setting, and this worked really nicely for quite a while.
Yeah, and sounds like being programmatic, getting multiple disciplines involved, and really, I mean, that communication. So maybe let's dive into, like, I'm going to start because I love climbing movement. I love analyzing it a different way. I analyze it because of not as much performance, but more how it relates to injuries. Maybe let's just start with the basics. So warming up. What is and I know you have so many different tricks and different things that you do and recommend, and it's on a case-by-case scenario basis. but can you just share some knowledge, kind of over the years on what you feel like is appropriate for warming up?
Well, first of all, disclaimer, I shouldn't talk about what's appropriate to warming up. I can tell you my experience and my personal thing, and more, like if I see people with the bands going through the moves, listening, having the headphones off, this is not warming up. Now maybe you're doing something for the tissue, but somehow there's also, just recently, there was an injury in Germany from an athlete I knew from before. And I think that's a false security that people they leave it with a tissue preparation and then it's all good, and then they're not doing different tempos even, like
just going nice and easy through, and your brain shut off.
Exactly, and this is, I mean, everything I say, the older I get, the more I think if you are engaged, I never lost an athlete through because of injury, so that he or she couldn't compete. And I see lots of people that doing all the proper stuff that people are supposed nowadays that are injured all the time. And so I'm very much like in everything. The first thing is that you have to be engaged. You want to have also the whole mental intensity. You have to be curious. What comes next? You have to see your gaze being engaged, that you look into the right direction, or that you have a certain focus of attention and all this stuff. So just to give the audience a little bit idea. Jan Hoyer won his first World Cup in 2013, and in isolation before the finals, he didn't put up his climbing shoes once. And it was really because it was always struggling with skin. So especially when it was hotter, like in Toronto in 2015. We tried to find ways to warm him up without touching the holes too much, and because it's difficult in isolation to really warm up for what's asked later. Like for example, there's never a slap or something, and so, but it's again, it was all challenge based. So basically I don't know how these carts are called that are in the laboratory with the small wheels. Mm-hmm. And I was standing on this, and Jan was doing front, or basically he was releasing his feet. He was going around. He was doing a muscle up. He was doing a rollover.
And you're talking about maybe the cart that you kind of push forward, maybe a TV
exactly.
sits on it. Or
Yeah.
Space.
Yeah. Right, and in German they're called lab cars, because they're laboratories. I don't know what.
Like a lab cart. And so he's in the back in isolation.
He's in isolation, and that we saw spotted this card, and we were really like, oh damn, it was really hot, and what to do for warm up. And at the end, it was almost like we had so much fun with all these little challenges that it was time flew. It was, and he was fantastically prepared. So, and I already mentioned this. This is like in modern bouldering comps. That's I think it's getting a little bit better, but even 3 years ago, people didn't warm up for the slabs. So there was no ankle mobility. Basically, there was no concept of, okay, I'm expected to stand on these sloping volumes. I better somehow move my ankles so that they...
I mean, I'm assuming the emphasis was just on the arms and the fingers, right? And maybe the torso, but there wasn't that loaded ankle bend in multiple directions to pre-prepare.
No. Exactly. And also, I mean, what goes hand in hand, and I think cannot be separated, is also like the mental. If you come out at a bouldering comp and expect a compression problem and expect to fight for your life as if the wolves are chasing you, and then you have to do this it's a little bit like me playing the piano as a teenager, the arousal state is just not right for what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, so I mean, your central nervous system almost has to be prepared. And I know in your teachings, you talk about this like ecological approach, right? And like through movement, exploration, body awareness.
Yeah.
And that sounds like that's like a foundation. And you've kind of described how that originated, this kind of history. But is that fair to say that's like a foundation of your philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, this is a
or
big
a
term.
component of your
Yeah,
philosophy?
yeah. I mean, I think already with the emphasis on your sensory input, you know, and making sure that your attention is focused on. I don't want to say the right things, but you know, that there is a focus of attention on something, you know, and that you somehow are in charge of this, because I mean, just it's quite. Like, let's talk about your profession, you know, and there's a whole lot of internal focus of attention, you know, especially after you injured
Focus on this body movement,
yeah.
Focus on the arm in this position,
yeah.
you know,
yeah.
feel the pressure through this one muscle.
Exactly. And that's all good. You know, there's a time and space for that. But like if you want to perform in sports, external focus of attention works better, and it's also a good insurance against choking. But again, I think it's not the nice thing is if you have an external focus of attention, you're warmed up much better. Like, for example, throwing balls at you know, that you catch a couple of balls in warming up.
And I've heard of a lot of your different warm-ups too, and you know, that's just the start, is catching balls to, you know.
I mean, if you do, like, I love mat balls for that, because you can throw them. You don't have to you know. I mean, we did this in isolation in Vail, the Austrian coach and me, and we almost destroyed the mirror. You know, I was standing on the Bozo ball, and he's really powerful, and he threw the but in general, this is, I mean, I noticed, like, even in the States and many other countries, because of all the liabilities and insurance, and so we in Central Europe, you wouldn't expect this to hear this from a German, but you can be more crazy. You know, people, like, if in this context of sports, and because of our insurance laws are a little bit different, you know, we got almost kicked out in Vail when we did what we were just goofing around, and what we would do in any isolation in Europe. No, so.
But you got, I mean, it sounds like your philosophy, I mean, you have to be present, you have to be engaged. In order to do that, you need new stimuli, different things that keep you in that moment, rather than putting on those headphones, grabbing the band, thinking about your arm muscle. That's the muscle I'm strengthening. Now that muscle is prepared. It's a lot bigger than that, if that's a fair summary.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, what about with the eyes? Like, how important, because I know you do some activities with visual tracking, with sensation, touch. Maybe how important, maybe we'll start with the visual field. Are there any maybe interesting things you do for climbers that were related to the eyes? And maybe we can work our way down, maybe the entire system.
Yeah, I mean, as a coach, I think I try to stay as agnostic as possible, so that I don't look really for like that I don't want to imply my new acquired neurocognitive methods. But you have really ambitious and good climbers that close their eyes shortly before arriving at a hold. Mm-hmm. And for example, that's a low-hanging fruit, you know. Or under stress, I mean, there's the thing called the quiet eye. So, and this is so powerful even for researchers that in basketball, they can tell you if you're going to score before the ball leaves your hand, you know, just by the fixation on the hoop or whatever you're fixating on.
Just like how the eyes visually gaze and fixate.
Where you're looking at, you know, the whole, all kinds of gaze behavior, you know, like how the eyes move. It's actually quite interesting, you know, that is for the audience now, like, because what we perceive or what we are aware of is absolutely not what happens in the eye. The eye, even when we're talking, you know, we have the saccades, and they are impossible for us to track. And as humans, we also have really limited temporal resolution compared to insects, you know. So Okay, that's maybe a hand-on example. The quiet eye. So you have to go for the sloper, and maybe it's a modern move. So you have to not only catch this, but you have to go on, you know, like a double clutch or
one of these moves. To the next hold dynamically.
So that raises already the question: at what point are you fixating on the foothold you're stepping on, and when do you change for the target hold? And if there's another hold beyond the first contact, when are you looking at that, if at all? And all these, of course, they're all context dependent, so there's no hard rules for this. But if you just observe this with your athletes, you know, you can make a lot of progress. You know, sometimes it's only just like changing your strategy for a bit. In most cases, if this gets untreated or nobody really cares about this, then the more stressed we are, the more we lose our quiet eye. Now, so basically, because our intention is also not so, we're stressed, we don't know really what we're trying to accomplish. We're in the tunnel, and so we're looking at the volume in this example, and then like right when you would not need it, you would look up and you have all blurry vision, and then try to catch the hold. And you're not even aware of that.
Yeah, and so it's interesting. Yeah. And there could be the head movement or just the eyes.
Totally. No, totally. The head movement too. I'm really love like over COVID with surf skating, and I got to remind me. I surf a little bit, but as a landlocked.
What's surf skating?
Surf skating. Yeah, they have the front axle is much more movable than on the regular skateboard, and so you can really flow. You don't have to step down and push. Yeah, and it's just a very smooth, enjoyable movement.
And you kind of like move your body, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and you move your head. You know, and I'm telling so many climbers, you know, that where your gaze goes, your body goes. And so I starting with the surf skating. I think I'm doing fine. I film myself. I look at it. I think, well, this is not head driven at all. You know, like I still have this little snap with my hip at the wrong time. And it was like a little revelation now how powerful like the gaze direction even is.
And the impulse is basically, I'm assuming, starts from the eyes and the head, and then that travels down the body.
Yeah, and then also, of course, the interaction with the vestibular system, you know, so with a balance system, and all in all, again, you know, it's not like I'm definitely not an expert in this, but if you can just point the athlete, okay, maybe look for the red hold the next time, you know, or maybe close your eyes at all, or then again, you can help them a lot.
Yeah, changing the external focus as well, right? And it's fascinating because maybe you just watch that move and you watch like a replay, like visual. Yeah. And the athlete's wondering, why do I keep missing, you know, that second hold in the movement? Yeah. And maybe it has nothing to do with the body. Maybe it's actually what you're saying. It's driven by, you know, the head and the eyes.
I think that's even more powerful than we all think it is, you know, because from looking at the Janja Ganbret is also, if you know, especially with these fast moves, it is so powerful if you're really anticipating how the contraction has to work. You know, and she doesn't do this in a conscious way, of course, you know, but she's so observant that she knows I come from this angle. You know, this is general Tau theory, anticipating time of arrival. You know, so there's all kinds of really funky. I mean, it's wonderful that we can do this, but basically, Janja flies to a hold. She looks like your regular girl, athletic girl, nothing special. And then for a fraction of a second, she looks like the Hulk, no? But just like
just instantaneous before contact.
And but what every strength and conditioning coach would call rate of force development. But I think the key point is that she knows what to. She arrives pre-flexed. You know, there's no muscle slack when she arrives, and again, you know. if you don't look at your goal, at your target, that's really difficult to accomplish.
Yeah, and that's that almost anticipatory control that, of course, has been developed and trained and practiced, over time.
Absolutely, but again, I think like from coaches or that like all the Slovenian climbers have a very agile gaze behavior. And they like to try to get some parallel, some like how birds that cannot move the eyes, it's amazing how precise they are, because how they're calibrating on the target. So there are all kinds of stuff, things going on that we don't know yet. But again, it's sometimes it's a really low hanging fruit to look for things like this.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, all right, so let me break down. I'm going to name like a physiotherapy exercise that's very like standard, very kind of internally focused, like the opposite of what, kind of where your mind goes. And tell me if you can come up with something that kind of on the fly.
Cool.
That would kind of make that more realistic, attention-based climbing. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah. Actually, it's a good challenge. Even if I fail, because this is actually what I really try to accomplish. At one point, I want to have challenges for. Yeah. Hopefully, let's hear it.
All right. This is straight. This is off the cuff.
Yeah.
All right. So a climber. And I'm just going to say, this is what you visually see. So you show up and you see a climber before competition. They have a resistance band. It's, in front of them, and they're pulling it backwards into like a letter L to strengthen the rotator cuff. And they're doing that to just get some shoulder girdle muscles turned on. So that would be one exercise. How do we take something in the shoulder girdle and make that a little bit more intention-based than climbing specific?
Well, I mean, it's not the same muscle groups than what you would just show, but if you put this climber in a squat and try to ask his or her to balance something in her open hand, over her head, and then like even if you think about it, I mean, like for you don't have to be in fantastic shape, but if you hold something in a ball, but you don't grab it, and you lie on your back, and then you try to get up, and the ball, the hand always needs to be above your head.
Yep. Always trying to move the hand to make sure.
And you're not allowed to use the other hand, so you're not allowed to use the other hand.
So you're on the ground, the ball's in your palm, you can't use your other hand, and you have to get up. Yeah. Or
maybe even, I think even when you, now that I think about it, now there could be a ball in the other hand, of course, to make it a little bit harder. The thing is that scales super nicely. It's super nice to do regressions and progressions. So I, like in this particular, I do a lot for warming up, a lot of this, basically this hostage situation, where you, like even if you think about it, you're prone in a bathtub, and your hands are tied behind your body, and get out of the bathtub. That feels like a really awkward off-width.
Oh man, I'm having bad memories of off-width climbing with.
but things like this, and again, it would be impossible to say what muscle groups, it is. But I really love. Actually, I have a yoga block right here.
Let's see it. Let's see it.
Just for the, but I just, if you try to manipulate, manipulate it like this.
All the way around.
Like this, like a tray, like a waiter does the tray.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you can do similar things. You might have seen, I got this from a Feldenkrais exercise, when you have it on your foot and and roll, and
Oh, so you're keeping it on your foot the whole time as you're rolling and moving.
Exactly. No, and that can, again, like if you have one yoga block on each of your hands and each on your feet, then it becomes at least V12. I would think like you almost would have like, of course not, but you need some decent body control. For example, for me, that's not achievable anymore. Yeah. I cannot do this. Like I have one stiff ankle now that makes it impossible. And also like in general, the flexibility, but also, and this is the nice part, I think it ties in so nicely with climbing because you have to be aware of where your base of support is, how you balance this. And so it's very related, at least to slab climbing.
Yeah, because it's engaging too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You don't want like just now when I did this demonstration and it slipped. And
like, there's some expensive equipment underneath.
Yeah, right? Exactly. There need to be some consequences.
Yeah.
And this is another. Yeah.
No, keep going.
No, that ties in with the whole mental side of it. No,
yeah, so if you say that's the attention, right?
Yeah. So if you're in isolation or whatever, like even before you climb, if you do these things, at least you make sure that you're awake and have this, and also people tend to loosen up a little bit. These are all exercises that are really awkward if you're rigid, and like as you might be when you're nervous. So it's a whole bunch of benefits, I think.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, actually, I'm going to try that when we get off.
And now I just mentioned with the progressions and regressions. So that's
I may need some regressions for myself. But
No, I don't. No, you're fine. No, and this is another thing. It almost primes. If you do like ridiculous, playful stuff for warming up, it primes you to not be afraid of being embarrassed. I think people try to postpone the embarrassment too far in the future, instead of just exposing themselves and getting used of making a fool out of themselves.
Yeah, just do it now. Well, you're about to show. What was the other? You were showing something balancing.
No, it's just if you think about it, if you have if you support the yoga block like this, then it becomes a lot harder. Like even if I do like shoulder rotations, look what has to happen. Like how I
on your tips, you're doing it on your fingertips.
Yeah.
I almost imagine I have some my grandmother passed down through the generations. China plates. I can imagine if I used one of those, the motivation not to drop it would be very high.
Totally. Yeah. And even like a little bit related. I mean, this is very much informed by the circus arts, because there's if you Google contact juggling, and the underlying idea is always the same as isolations. And there's also a term in jazz dance where you or in miming. Miming is the classic isolation exercise. You isolate one part of the body from the rest of your body.
Is that self-miming, one half versus the other half, or is it miming someone across from you and you're kind of mirroring and miming their movements?
Okay, no, the other person is not an element, not necessarily.
It's yourself.
Miming as in performing miming, it's just this illusion of that you're holding something in your hand.
Oh, I see. I thought I almost was thinking like,
that like the typical miming exercise is like this, you're glued, exactly. You're glued in, and you're even doing the talk, so that to make it believable that there is something that you're hitting. But in my mind, that's very related to at least slab climbing, because in slab climbing you have nothing in your hand, or something really, really tiny, and basically you have to prepare your body for the next move, and ideally there's not more peak force. There's not more force on the hold while you're doing this, and so that's isolation. If you do these isolation exercises, I think it's really helpful, because it's also like being nervous. We tend to overshoot our movements. There's a lot of jerk. and I think many people don't realize if they train in a really jerky, what they think is explosive way, that messes with this ability to isolate and being also able to break sometimes you have to break the kinetic chain. It's not all follow through and
it's not like kayaking where every stroke, right? You have to dig
no,
in.
no, it's not. No. And it's also like, again, you have to change, to be able to change this, and if you cannot, if you don't even have the tools to change your movements, your mind won't follow, and vice versa, like it really helps to, yeah.
So let me give one more example then, and we'll kind of convert it. I talked about maybe a strength exercise, and you went into all these ways that 100% the exercises you gave perform and improve strength of that muscle we talked about. 100%.
And also, one side effect is like, this is why I told you squat. Because, I mean, it's so related, like overhead mobility is all hips, right? I mean, you know better, of course, but like where I'm at, like really, because I can fake a lot with rib flare. And so, we have all our compensation. And this is the other thing, basically, and this is actually really from for a coach, that's a lot of fun because the challenges I'm proposing, they have to be almost as like we call them watertight, so that there's no escape. It's almost like putting the athlete into a prison and being like, try to escape from this. And so in the deep squat, squatting down, this is so much more awkward, like, and for me, for example, with the right arm, it's really limited. I can do very, very little overhead in a deep squat.
So what you're saying is basically if you were to do some type of coordination exercise or something to, kind of warm the system up and you were to do it standing, it looks way different for you, especially on your right side when you squat because of the amount of hip mobility required. The lat muscles are now put on, this tension and it just falters.
Absolutely. And also it's like, especially for younger athletes, it's a easy sell, because it's a situation that can happen in climbing. Now, like you pull a roof, you're squatting down, like over the lip of the roof, and you have to do some, you have some overhead things to do, and in the worst case, you have another roof that you have to press upwards, and that would be like my competence in this situation is ridiculous nowadays. And so it's very easy for the athlete because very often you find yourself in an argument, like because they have this one idol who did this climb, although he or she's really not very mobile, blah, 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 blah. But if you show them, okay, this could be actually a situation that could happen in climbing, and look, you feel competent? No, then maybe we should talk about it and do something about it.
Yeah, and it's really, it sounds like a lot of these positions mirror or mimic what you're going to do when you climb. And that's really a lot of for the athletes, it seems like that's part of the connection. They're like, I'm going to be in this position on the route or on the boulder. All right, well, I'll do one more scenario. So there's a climber, we talked about maybe strength. They're doing this resistance band. You gave a lot of ideas on that. A climber is like, all right, slabs are coming up. I have to loosen up my ankle. And they go into like a standard calf stretch. They go against the wall. They put one leg behind them and they hold that stretch for 30 seconds. Then they bend their knee. They hold that for 30 seconds. They do that on both sides. They say, okay, my muscle is now prepared for my ankle bending during slabs. I'm ready to go. What's your
better than nothing, because many of them haven't done anything like that. But it's also, I mean, when it's an outside edge, what's an inside edge? And we had volumes with us to warm up on, like we put them on the floor and just balance around those. And also, like, even if you can combine it, like you're standing on the volume, and then I give you another tricky little challenge, like you're standing on the volume, and you pick up a golf ball from the ground, and you're only allowed it to hold between your pinkies.
Yeah.
And if this is too easy, we take a soap, a bar of soap, then it will be B15. And so you pick it up, and then you step through with both legs.
What? Wait. So they pick it up, they're on a volume, and then they step their leg through.
Yeah, this I think you can do it. It's not super hard, but again, I mean, you don't have to do super hard things. And if you've never done this, it's also very engaging because and I think it's very related. Like from my experience, people that would do well in warm-ups like this, I mean, not necessarily like the best or so, but you can tell that they play with a challenge, and then very often, like somebody like Jan Hoyer would instantly ask me if another finger is allowed, so that he instantly, like all the good climbers, instantly try to increase their wiggle room. And if you're not really careful, they get you to say, okay, do whatever you want, and then they're like, oh, that was easy. But this is good fun. This is good fun. So I'm really used to, if this is noticeably not challenging for them, then you get your wet bar of soap and try the same thing, and then good luck. And then, okay, what does this for ankle mobility? Not a whole lot, but you're having one is just mindlessly stretching. Probably does the same for the tissue. I don't know. Yeah. The other one is you also cannot really care because you're so busy trying to hold the golf ball, and you're also fighting for balance. We can put you in different, that you've, unfortunately, I don't have the terms for what is it, eversion, inversion, or so.
Correct.
What the foot.
Supination, pronation, inversion, eversion. Yeah.
Exactly. And so we can, if we would watch it, okay, for example, on the volume, you're not allowed to stand on the edges, and stuff like this. And then again, if you spend the time you spend there with a golf ball, is really valuable and flies. It doesn't feel like a chore at all.
And from a perspective, I mean, I'm looking at this through a physical therapy perspective. They are stretching the calf muscle as every time their heel dips down just a little bit and comes back up. That is a micro stretch, and that's probably what they need to do. When they're actually using those volumes. So they're truly preparing. So how do you come up with this stuff? I know you have this long history of all these ideas, but there's new ideas, I'm sure of, that just like come up all the time. Is it like you're at night, you're kind of like sleeping in bed and it wakes you up? Is it you're out at the climbing gym? Like, how do these new ideas and experiments come to you?
Actually, I learned more in school than I thought in real time. That was good. And then also the performing arts aspect. One thing I feel is a little, not done enough, like in dance class that I hated or I had a hard time with. One thing, we were doing a lot of floor work. So we were moving because she told us you cannot deal with all the degrees of freedom anyhow. So I have you just rolling on the floor. And then, just this idea to change planes, so basically we were really well educated in terms of, okay, what kind of constraints can we use? Even in the 80s already. So it was like, okay, if you do this on the floor, like for example, how you initiate a swing for brachiation. And this is a big part of what holds many climbers back. They don't want to hear it, but contralateral, bilateral, crossing midline, all this coordination aspect. And there are many more of those demands in modern climbing than there were in just two-dimensional.
It's totally changed, right? Like climbing now is, I don't know if it's totally changed, but I could say the competition scene has changed quite a bit.
Yeah, what I struggle a little bit with, like in my mind, it's all climbing, and what people call the real climbing is something that came up in the 80s and 90s and is still done. This is steep, two-dimensional, grip strength dependent climbing. That's very enjoyable, but like in my mind, that's not all that climbing offers. And so sometimes you have, if you go in the Alps or in the Rockies and do some really easy climb, you can have a really funky three-dimensional situation that would be very challenging for some of the. If they only climb on the moon wall, they won't be very well prepared for that. And this is what I'm in this discussion. I'm a little bit tired of always explaining this. Look, like climbing, like changing corners could be a World Cup boulder problem. Ooh. And it would totally do the job.
You mean on the nose, right?
On the nose, yes. Yeah. And even the roof, it's very height dependent, of course. So, but there's so many. There's so many world-class boulder problems or recently I saw a photo of King Cobra, of the boulder problem in Yosemite again, and I thought, oh, that's a pretty problem, but it's also in a way that it helps to be good with the stemming,
But that's interesting because I see it almost hit a hot point when like climbing has changed, because climbing hasn't changed. Like this has always been out there. All those routes, changing corners has always been there. And so it just maybe seems like climbing is now, the repertoire is expanded to so much more, than was used by most people kind of in the early days.
Yeah, but again, like if you look back, like of course our biggest inspirations are the guys that stayed in the trees, the monkeys, the primates, and they do so much. Like their movement diet is so much more richer than even the diet of a World Cup boulderer, like on a daily basis. Like if you look at the jumps, they're funky. They have severe consequences, and they have a changing, like even if you try to climb on trees, now how bendy they are, and you're stuck between two trees and let go and have to deal with a flex. And I mean, this is really challenging, and so I don't understand this argument. This is not real climbing. I'm a little bit allergic.
Do you ever put your athletes into just like off with climbs, just to like, what's your thoughts on, because I feel like I'm one of the few people that love off with climbing. Part of it I do enjoy suffering a little bit, but it is so much like body English. But tell me about your experience with off.
But for me that totally ties in at in coaching, that's called the constraints-led approach. So basically you as a coach, you're looking for, okay, she's really has fantastic grip strength, but there is like body wise, there's not a lot of now she leaves a lot of opportunities on the table, so I should not allow her to use her fantastic grip strength. So then the offwidth comes, there are very few, at least if you can design it in a way that, you have to do a full body wiggle. And I love it in bouldering, you can do this, where basically you're constantly sliding, so that there's no false sense of security. And I love those problems. Also, I don't know if you ever been in Castle Hill in New Zealand?
Bouldering there? No.
It's limestone, and it's not super slippery, but it's definitely some of the slippier surface you boulder on, and it's really intense, and it has this quality. Like I would love to take my athletes to Castle Hill. It's the same idea, because it's basically it doesn't allow them to apply things they're good in, so they have to, like with going back to the offwidth, you really have to do a worm like movement
to make yourself go up an inch.
Yes. And then you slide down 2 inches.
Yeah. And all right, well, we're kind of getting to the end of this, kind of the interview process. And I want to ask, like, if there's something, from your advice, like that you kind of give, and this is your own biases, your own views, but to climbers on how to keep their body resilient. I don't know if injury prevention is the right term, but how to, kind of make sure they're resilient, with climbing. And I know it's hard to boil down, but kind of what's your thoughts on that, or what would be your advice?
No, I have absolutely, and it might be a little bit too basic, like in this context, but I really think that first of all, injury is not glamorous, and maybe you have to do a little bit of soul searching, because in our society, it's all an injury implies that you tried hard. And many athletes are happy with this. I personally know lots, depressingly many athletes that have a fantastic potential, but every time they could have showed it, they were injured. So it's not about injury prevention, but without you changing your habits and maybe even changing how you get your confidence, and maybe not doing the next fashionable thing, if it doesn't make sense to you, is already a step into the right direction. And this ties in with that ideally, I think every athlete should auto-regulate. So basically, there is no rigid plan. Nobody tells you what to do on Tuesday. You just have a general understanding of what you're trying to accomplish, and then you do this part of your training whenever you feel ready for it.
Wow. Yeah.
And I think that would really. Now I'm back to the injury avoidance, but that would really make things better for you. You have to take agency for your body and yourself. And this sounds really cliche, but in the truest meaning. So basically, there can't be anybody like I'm always this very. In the States, for example, a lot of the training looks like a military drill, and even the term drill sounds not right for me. And there's somebody yelling at you. And for me, that's basically the last thing I want to do. And I actually never did, like that somebody that your own ambitions are not, or how driven you are is not enough. And you need somebody yelling at you, or need somebody to even tell you what to do and when, and to try harder and work harder. If you don't do this, I think you're better off.
Yeah, sound advice. And it fits you so well, right? It's like who you are, who you embody, your experiences over time has really developed this pretty amazing philosophy.
Yeah, on the other hand, I mean, I had my fair share, and I'm still doing lots of stupid things, in this regard.
One thing I'm going to try is the hands behind the back in the bathtub, though.
Yeah, there are all kinds. I mean, we could have so much fun, and it's really like, and this was when we were traveling to China, for example, and there was no gym, there were no gyms, but it's actually, I think people that are attracted to climbing are attracted to problem solving, and they're really engaged in little stupid challenges like those.
Yeah, and I'll substitute stupid for fun, because I'm gonna try a bunch of these. So Udo, where can people find you if they want to learn more about this? If they want to maybe even take some courses, on learning about movement, can you tell us a little about where people can find you?
Yeah, my website is udini.com, udini.com, and I have some educational resources. Like I'm just working on this mammoth. I'm always going into my project with a idea, or there will be really just a side project really fast, and then it takes 2 years. So I'm working on a climbing performance coaching series, and there's also ideas to improve your climbing. There's actually a couple of those ideas are in those videos, and then I'm also on social media, and just get in touch. And I really enjoy. I'm still very curious. That's my main yeah, drive. So, yeah.
I was going to say driver, right? It's just the constantly.
Yeah.
So I'll put all that information so people can
Thank
find
you.
you in the show notes. And again, awesome. Great information. I had a lot of fun. I'm sure everyone listening and watching is going to try this stuff as well.